Hey guys, it's Will here, welcome back to the channel, and tonight I've got the new Codex Eldar to review. Now, unlike some people who were able to get this book a week before it came out, or even get a review done on release date, I'm not getting this out particularly close. I think it's been out for about 4 or 5 days now, and I was originally planning to do something earlier, but life's got in the way. But what that has meant is that I've had a good chance to have a bit of a read of it, put some lists together, come up with some ideas, see how things might synergise. So rather than our normal first impressions review that me and Sam like to do, particularly with the books in the last edition where we'd sort of banter and have a read of the new stuff, most of sort of what is new is already sort of out there. There's lots of places you can find out what's in here. So tonight I'm rather going to look at the detail and give some of my opinions. So yeah, I'm hoping to make this video reasonably long. I've got some things to cover, even though I won't be going through absolutely everything. But it's just going to be me talking, so if you want to see a video with lots of fancy models and pictures, there's plenty of others for that. Unfortunately, I haven't got Sam here tonight. Not been able to link it up to do one with some banter, but basically just imagine someone next to me trashing everything about Eldar, and that's going to basically be Sam. He hates all elves, so what are you going to do? But yeah, anyway, let's get into this. So in some ways the changes are quite small for this. It's not like some of the forces that have had masses of new units added or a real step change in how they play. It's more a subtle revision, which is all the Eldar really needed. They weren't bad before, they were just a few things that in the index kind of didn't work, and the points values were a bit high, which I will come onto later. But the biggest change that everybody's getting in their codex is Craftworld attributes. So these are the same as chapter tactics, and I think it's a really cool thing that they've been including these in all of the books. It allows you, whatever army you're playing, you've got the same sort of options as Space Marines have on picking different types of forces to represent different things. So to actually play the craft world of your choosing now, it's not just a case of picking the models that would use. You get specific buffs for playing them. And I think in their own way they're all pretty good, but let's have a look and see what is what. Now I'm going to start off with Yanden Craftworld, because I think this is possibly the weakest one. So a unit with this attribute can never lose more than one model as a result of a failed morale test. In addition, units with a damage chart double the number of wounds they actually have when working out degrading stats. So, for example, you've got a Wraith Lord with only 4 wounds left, it counts as having 8 wounds left. So, yeah, the first one, first part of this is useful. You can only lose one model to a morale check, but generally with Eldar you're most of the time going to be running smaller units anyway, particularly if you play Yanden, and the leadership's not bad to start off with. I mean, if we just flick through and have a look at a couple of key Eldar units, here we go. Dire Avengers have natural leadership 8, even Guardians have natural leadership 7. And if you're playing Yanden, you're going to want Wraithguard, and Wraithguard have natural leadership 9, and they're only in squads of 5. So if they've taken 4 casualties, so a squad of 5 takes 4 casualties, rolls a 6, that's going to be 10. You're only going to lose one guy anyway, but that was the whole squad at that point. So I don't think that part of it is especially strong. Maybe if you're running larger units of very high value models it might help, but it doesn't instantly leap out at me. But the second part is nice, particularly if you tend to run a lot of vehicles and Wraith constructs. Again, something Yanden might do, particularly with the Wraith constructs, so that could be handy, but I just don't think it's as strong as some of the others. Although for that one time when your Wraith Lord is, say, on... Let me just bring up the Wraith Lord's chart here. Here we go, so he degrades at 5 wounds. So say he's on 4 wounds and suddenly counters having 8. You know, it's going to give you +1 to your weapon skill, ballistic skill, and movement. But it's a little situational, because a wise opponent will completely wreck the Wraithlord rather than just you know, leave him on half wounds. Although it's easier said than done now, because all the Wraith constructs, apart from possibly the Wraith Knight, all gained an additional point of toughness in this edition, so that's cool. Now, saim-hann. This one I think is going to see a lot of play from people who already have an Eldar army. Reroll failed charge rolls for units with this attribute. Not, you know, not bad, but not too great. But this is the big one. Bike units do not suffer penalties to hit when moving and firing heavy weapons. So what was the unit that we all spammed in the last edition, Eldar players? It was jet bikes. And we all gave them scatter lasers, because the scatter packs were like the best thing in the game. And for those of you who didn't magnetise, you know, you're now stuck with all these scatter bikes that are all at -1 to hit when they move, and it's not great. Well, play saim-hann, all those scatter lasers are now going to be firing on the move at full ballistic skill. And, you know, if you want to include some melee elements to your army as well, Howling Banshees got better, Scorpions got cheaper. You know, the other part of that helps as well. One thing to note is that biker units does include Vipers, so you know, heavy weapons on Vipers are a bit more viable now. You know, missile launchers, bright lances, Vipers could get a bit more play in a saim-hann army. So yeah, this is certainly a good one, and one I think a lot of Eldar players will naturally lean to because they've probably got 20 scatter bikes already. Now the one I'm going to be running, biel-tan, the Swordwind. +1 leadership to Aspect Warriors. Surprisingly useful, actually, because most of the Aspect Warriors are on a reasonably high leadership. This alone I don't think is amazing, but you know, you jump from 8 to 9, that's certainly not bad. It might come in handy from time to time, but this is the big one. Reroll hit rolls of 1 with all shuriken weapons. That's your shuriken pistols, your shuriken catapults, shuriken cannons, because unlike Space Marine abilities that only affect the infantry and dreadnoughts and bikes, these ones affect everything apart from Phoenix Lords. So that Wave Serpent with 2 shuriken cannons on the turret and another one underslung, yeah, they're all rerolling ones to hit. Oh, and the 10 Dire Avengers in there, yeah, they're rerolling ones to hit as well. So with the ubiquity of shuriken weapons in the Eldar army, and the fact the shuriken cannon went down 2 points, if I've read it right, you're going to see a lot of rerolls with this. You know, we're talking salamander levels of rerolling, if not more. And yeah, it's great. Obviously, it does sort of pigeonhole you into one weapon type. You know, it's going to make you want to take shuriken weapons, but that's no bad thing. Shuriken weapons are pretty good. You know, you've got the pseudo rending on there, or what we used to call pseudo rending. It's now 6s to wound are at -3 AP. So, you know, and they all tend to be assault weapons or pistols, so you're still going to have a lot of mobility. One thing you are going to have to be careful of, though, is picking shuriken weapons for everything and leaving yourself with no anti-tank or no weapons over 24-inch range. But I think, you know, if you're playing biel-tan, you want the Aspect Warriors anyway, so, you know, unit of Fire Dragons, or 2 units of Fire Dragons, maybe in a Falcon with a Bright Lance, something like that. It's going to give you something back for the anti-tank, and, you know, Reapers have got cheaper as well, so, you know, you just got to be careful not to pick all the shuriken weapons and leave yourself with no anti-tank. But yeah, I think very solid, although I have to say I would have liked something more Aspect Warrior specific, because some of your best sources of shuriken weapons, Wave Serpents, Guardians, Warwalkers, Viper jet bikes, none of them are particularly biel-tan specific, but are quite significantly buffed by this. And it's certainly no bad thing, I'm not complaining, but something that, you know, would have helped Aspect Warriors more. I mean, like Warp Spiders, classic biel-tan unit, get virtually no benefit from this. They can't take a shuriken weapon, and they already have leadership 8 re-rolling failed leadership tests and are generally taken in squads of 5, so really I don't think they gain a lot from this, but I think on the whole it's a really strong stratagem. But I think the most strong one is still to come. But before we go on to that, have a look at Ulthwé. This one is solid. It's very similar to the Iron Hands. Basically, it's a 6-up, feel no pain. So whenever a unit loses a wound, roll a d6. On a 6, it's ignored. And it doesn't stack though, so you can't have other ways of ignoring a 6, like the Hemlock Wraithfighter Spirit Stone, for example, doesn't stack with this. You choose which one you use. But yeah, certainly very solid. If you're playing like Guardian Heavy, would particularly benefit because you just simply got more wounds, so it's going to come up more. But you know, it's every model pretty much benefits from this, so it's a flat across the board benefit that anyone can make use of. Just slightly tweak up the resilience of an army that, you know, isn't known for being that resilient. But finally, Alteok Fieldcraft. Now this, I think, is one that you're going to see a lot of tournament players playing, simply because it plays very well into you know, just benefiting everything across the board. Your opponent must subtract 1 to hit for attacks that target units with this attribute at a range of more than 12 inches. So it's the Raven Guard strategy, but you're getting this on everything, and an army that can potentially play a more long-ranged game. For example, I mean, the one GW cited was Fire Prisms, which obviously got a lot better and have a 60-inch range, so can really hang back, but also Rangers. If I just bring up the entry for Rangers a second, obviously the unit that particularly comes to mind with Alteok. So these guys, you already subtract -1 to hit with ranged weapons. So that's meaning a Space Marine firing his bolter at these guys is going to need a 5 to hit if they're outside 12 inches in an Alteok list. And they gain +2 to the cover save instead of +1. So these guys, who also got like an 8 points drop in this edition, are going to be incredibly tough to move for toughness 3, 1 wound infantry models that are troops. You know, stick them in terrain outside 12 inches, -2 to hit and +2 to their armour, giving them a 3+ save, and you know, guardsmen are going to have a nightmare hitting these. And -2 to hit, guard are needing 6s, and if the guard have done anything that gives them a negative modifier to hit, they're needing 7s. They can't do it. It's simple. There isn't, as far as I'm aware, a rule to say that 6 to hit always hits regardless of modifiers. Orcs basically can't hit them. It's impossible. Orc boys outside 12 inches cannot hit this target. So I think it's going to be really strong, really frustrating to play against. And you can certainly build an Eldar army designed to pick your opponent apart at range, and then if they do get close, move back. Use your manoeuvrability, so really strong. I think they're all good. I think Yanden is probably the one you're more likely to want to take just because you're running a Yanden army or have a very specific build in mind. Alteok is probably the strongest, but I can certainly see good uses for biel-tan, saim-hann and Ulthwé as well. So, and you know, worst case scenario, it's free rules. You know, you don't pay anything for these. You get these as standard. Now I want to look at some of the highlights from the other new things that this has introduced, because as with every new codex, they're bringing in new Warlord traits, new relics, new stratagems, and new psychic powers. So I'm not going to run through them all because, you know, if you want to look at them all, go out and buy the book. There's probably somebody on YouTube who has gone through all of them, but I'm just going to pick out some of my favourites that I think are going to see a lot of play. So let's start with the Warlord traits. So as with your your other codexes, you get 6 Warlord traits that anyone can have, and then specific ones for each craft world. And incidentally, if you take a Phoenix Lord, you cannot have a Warlord trait on him as your Warlord. So, you know, if you've got a Phoenix Lord and another character, make the other character the Warlord, even if he's a 35-point Warlock and he's standing next to Asherman. Make the Warlock the Warlord. So, let's see then, what is good here? Seer Shifting Vectors, which is the number 6 one, that looks decent. Once per battle round, so that is per turn as opposed to per player turn. You can reroll a single hit, wound, save, psychic test, or deny the witch for your Warlord. So if you've got a Farseer here, this is going to be quite handy. You know, maybe hold it back for your deny the witch. But even if you've got something a bit more fighty, like an Avatar or an Autarch, you can always, you know, use that to reroll their attacks or their save. You know, rerolling a save on an Avatar would be quite nice. Maybe save it from a high damage wound. So that's decent. Let's see, what else have we got? Your Ambusher Blades is nice for buffing the AP of weapons on a 6. So 6 to wound, is it, or 6 to hit? I make a hit roll of 6. Hang on, I really should have read this before I actually started reviewing this. Oh no, actually that's not very good because it's 6s to hit, but it's in the fight phase, and generally, I suppose if you've got, you know, Scorpions near your Warlord, I mean Banshees don't worry too much about this, and neither do Shining Spears, because they've already got really good AP, so maybe not such a good one unless you've got a Warlord who's accompanying Scorpions, but that's quite unlikely because the only Warlord who can naturally easily accompany Scorpions is Karandras, and obviously he doesn't get a Warlord trait. Falcon Swiftness could be good if you're running an Avatar, +2 to the movement characteristic. So that's just going to help your Avatar to get across the board faster. I think of these, that is probably one of the ones I would particularly want to take on your Avatar. Because most of the others, you know, seem to particularly help sort of psychicness or resilience, and he's got a lot of resilience anyway because he can't be targeted, and then he gets into combat and kills whatever he's in with. So yeah, so I don't think any of the generic ones are amazing, but there's a few nice ones in there. Looking at the Craftworld specific ones, Alteoc's actually pretty decent. You get a 6-inch bubble of immunity to morale, basically automatically pass morale tests within 6 inches. So if you've got a cluster of rangers and you've got maybe a Farseer who's already sticking back with them to give out other buffs to hitting and things, well, now they are also immune to morale, which, you know, for not the most morale unit, because morale is now a word apparently. Let's see, rangers are, yeah, they're 7, so they're one of the more vulnerable units to morale, and with Alteoc you could justify quite large squads of these. You know, there's no reason you couldn't take a 10-man ranger unit. I believe that's allowed. Yeah, that's perfectly allowed, so you know, that might help to stop big ranger units running off. Biel-tan, however, we've got an amazing Warlord trait here. Pick a unit at the start of your shooting phase within 3 inches of your Warlord. You can reroll failed rolls to wound for that unit. Reroll failed rolls to hit. So it's basically guide, but only has a 3-inch range and isn't of psychic power. It's just a straight, yet you, there, rerolls to hit. So I'm thinking a Farseer on a jet bike, again, something a lot of us have. Whizzing round the back lines because he's not easy to target, and every turn, you know, just think, right, what do I need to target with this buff this turn and use his extreme manoeuvrability, because he's on a jet bike. I think that gives him like a total of 20-inch move if he advances. He can move 20 inches and just get next to the unit you need to particularly buff this turn. And if you want, you can still throw out guide at 24 inches at a separate target, or you can use this to save having guide on your Farseer in order to get other psychic powers like Fortune, Executioner, Doom, and or if you want the guide ability but don't really want to take a Farseer, again, this is quite a handy one to have. So Yanden, you just get your Warlord can deny as if you were a Psyker. If he is a Psyker, then he can deny one more, is nice. Yanden, Ulthway. Ulthway I could see getting a lot of use out of their one, because it's basically at the start of each turn yours and your opponent's roll a d6, and on 6 you gain a command point. So over an average, say the game goes 6 turns, you're going to roll that 12 times, you can get 2 extra command points, which is solid. The saim-hann, it's more about getting into combat with your Warlords. That's only really going to be an issue if you've got an Avatar or a Autarch. But I think still the majority of the time people are going to be favouring Farseers. I can't see this one being much use on a Farseer, because you really need to get him into combat, and you don't want your Farseer in combat. You want to keep him safe and out of there. So I think Seer of Shifting Vectors is useful. I think Falcon's Swiftness is good on an Avatar, because he's, he can't get a bike or wings or any other way to get faster, so give him an extra 2-inch of movement and make all the difference. And for the Craftworld ones, biel-tan, Alteok and Ulthway have the good ones. I think I'm particularly looking forward to using that biel-tan one when I get a chance to give my army a go. Right, so I think we'll do Relics next, because this should be fairly quick. A lot of these I found a little bit disappointing, to be honest. I know they're free now, but there was a few that were just like, that really isn't very good. So for example, we've got the Shimmer Plume of Achiriel. Subtract 1 from hit rolls that target this model. I just don't think, if you're playing them right, your characters should be being targeted very often, and -1 to hit is probably a little bit too late if they are being targeted, because none of them should be able to be picked out anyway most of the time at range. And then in combat, you really, with an army like Eldar who aren't very resilient, you need to get in, kill the target, get out. So there's a few of these. There's let's see, there's a similar one for Alteok, which is -1 to hit the target, but it's only in the shooting phase. And again, you really shouldn't be having your characters in a position where they're targeted in the shooting phase. You should be able to use the Eldar's natural manoeuvrability to keep them safe. I mean, this one also allows you to set up in hiding 9 inches away from your enemy and sort of appear in the first movement phase, but it's only for the one character, so unless you're using him for something very specific, like say an Autarch that you want supporting a striking Scorpion unit, I think it's a bit situational. But there are a few that Kurnos Bow is basically a shuriken pistol that does 2 damage, so it's still only a 1-shot strength 4 pistol with the shuriken ability, but it just does 2 damage. It's really not doing a lot. I think your relic can be better used, and I think other armies have better relics. But there are a few little gems in here. You've got the Phoenix gem, And that wasn't even meant as a pun, that just happened like that. So the first time this model is slain, roll a d6. For each unit, friend or foe, within 3 inches of that model. On or 2 or more, the unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. If at least 1 mortal wound is inflicted, then the model remains in play with a single wound left. If no mortal wounds are inflicted, this model is slain. So, again, most of your characters should, if they're going to die, they should be dying in melee, not at range, because they've all got less than 10 wounds. They shouldn't be being targeted. So I think this would be really good on an autarch or an avatar. So you run them up, you hit something hard. If they do get to kill you, you blow up. Chances are there should be somebody within 3 inches to take a mortal wound. Now it does have to slay a model, not just inflict a wound. Oh no, I apologise, you just have to inflict 1 wound. So even if you do 1 wound off a 20 wound model, that's 1 mortal wound, you stand back up on 1 wound. I think this could particularly be fun with the avatar in conjunction with one of the stratagems, which allows you to stand your avatar back up again with d6 wounds for 3 command points. So you've got your avatar, he runs into combat, hits stuff with his sword, kills stuff, your opponent finally kills him, avatar explodes with the Phoenix Gem, does some mortal wounds, you might take a few, but your opponent will take a few as well, and then your avatar gets back up on 1 wound, and he doesn't have a degrading stat line, so he can just carry on whacking people with his sword till he dies again, and if he dies again, well then you stand him back up with d6 wounds with your stratagem. So yeah, I think Avatar of Cain might finally be a viable choice for the first time since maybe even 3rd edition. So yeah, it might be one to try out. I might have to get myself an avatar to do that with. Other than that, a lot of them replace a particular weapon. There's at least 3 different power swords in here, with their own slight buffs. The Shard of Anaris is essentially just a power sword that rerolls to wound and does d3 damage, but it's still hitting its strength user. A Fire Saber could be nice. Strength +1, -4 AP, and each time you make a wound roll of 6+ for this weapon, inflicts a mortal wound instead of the normal damage. So, you know, invuln saves are certainly a thing, so even -4 AP isn't a guarantee to get through armour, but, you know, mortal wounds do. And because it's a 6+, you can buff this with a +1 to hit, and unlike the Shard of Anaris, whose rerolls can be replicated with rerolls to wound can be replicated by dooming the target, this one, there's very few ways to get additional mortal wounds in combat. So, you know, if you've got a character with a power sword, that might be a nice one. Final one I think is nice is the Citronome of Yanden. Once per battle at the start of the fight phase, you declare that this model is going to activate this relic, and if you do so for the rest of the fight phase, all Yanden Wraith constructs within 6 inches double their attacks. However, at the end of the phase, each unit that was affected suffers d3 mortal wounds. So say you've got 2 units of Wraithblades next to your Spirit Seer, shall we say, who's carrying this, because this I think belongs on something like a Spirit Seer. You activate it at the start of your turn. Those 2 units of Wraithblades double their attacks. So if we just skip over to Wraithblades, Wraithblades being obviously the optimal unit, but this would help Wraith Lords, Wraith Knights and Wraith Guard all getting stuck in combat as well. But Wraithblades, 2 attacks apiece, potentially +1 if they've got the Ghost Swords. So now they're doubling their attacks. They're at 4 attacks base, possibly 5 with the Ghost Swords. And yeah, okay, you take d3 mortal wounds at the end. What's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to lose 1 Wraithblade for doubling your attacks for a turn. And it's Yanden only, so you know it's your Wraithblades are going to be slightly more resilient to leadership anyway. so losing one more shouldn't affect the outcome of the combat. So I think this is a really strong one if you're going for a combat heavy Yanden list. But yeah, that's the Relics, or Remnants of Glory as they're known. Now stratagems, there is loads of these, and a lot of them are really good, either for giving something very strong to a particular unit or just doing something particularly out there. But I'm only going to pick on a few that I think are particularly likely to come up. So we're going to start with Webway Strike. And this, I think, is a brilliant one. I can see so many units that can benefit from this. So use it in your deployment zone, and you can in your deployment, and you can't use the Cloud Strike stratagem along with this. You spend 1 command point to allow 1 friendly infantry or bike unit to essentially gain deep strikes. So deploy off the board, and at the start of any of your movement phases, appear within 9 inches. You can spend 3 points to do it for 2. I think that starts to become a little bit expensive. Spending 3 points to have 2, I think you get more points efficient, obviously, to just do the 1 unit. But you can't do the Cloud Strike stratagem, which is essentially a vehicles with the fly ability version of this. It's one or the other. So you can either have a Falcon or a Wave Serpent turn up from Deep Strike, or you can have 1 or 2 infantry units or bike units turn up from Deep Strike. So very good for getting powerful short-ranged units into range. I'm thinking Wraith Guard with the D cannons, you're inside 12 inches, fire dragons, or even like assault unit like Howling Banshees got a lot better in this edition, and they could certainly appear via this method. What else have we got? Feigned Retreat is a really good one if you've got a large shooter unit that's locked down in combat. Basically, 2 command points, and it can fall back and still shoot, and there's no penalty. So unlike Ultramarine Chapter Tactics, where it's -1 to hit, this is just straight up fall back, shoot, and you can even assault again. But the limitation to this being, obviously, you do have to survive a round of combat first, which isn't something Eldar shooter units tend to like. But if your opponent is perhaps using something to tie them up rather than to actually do damage, then that could be a nice way to pull someone out. There's a few Craftworld specific. There's a Craftworld specific one for all of them. Guided Wraith Sight for Yanden could be fun. Basically, until your next turn, 1 Spirit Seer's Spirit Mark ability doubles its range up to 12, and allows all failed rolls to hit rather than just rolls of hit of 1 to be re-rolled. So this would stack quite nicely with the Citer Tome of Yanden relic. So that could give some 1 turn where not only are you doubling your attacks, but you are also re-rolling all your hit rolls within a 12-inch on targets within 12 inches of your Spirit Seer. So yeah, this could make a real kind of almost like a Death Star, but only really activates 1 time, but will do so much damage if done right that your opponent will be reeling and unable to come back from it. I've already talked about the Avatar Resurgent. Basically, the first time your Avatar is removed, you can spend 3 command points to stand himself up again with D6 wounds, and I see no reason why you couldn't use a command reroll to reroll that D6 if you're not happy with the first result. So, he stands back up on 1 wound. Well, I might as well use a command point. Oh, now he's got 5. Court of the Young King, I'm excited about as a biel-tan player who loves Aspect Warriors. Pick an Aspect Warrior unit, and they get +2 to their charge and reroll 1s. But if there's an Avatar nearby, they instead gain plus an Avatar within 6 inches. They gain +3 to their charge and reroll all failed rolls to hit. Howling Banshees now potentially adding 6 inches total to their charge and re-rolling all failed rolls to hit. They could get very nasty very quickly, but it is 2 command points, so use sparingly. There's Tears of Aisha, which is just a straight up pick a Wraith construct and give it D3 wounds back, which, you know, if you've got a Wraith Lord or a Wraith Knight that's just 1 point or 2 points into being degraded, might as well throw that on there, have another turn of shooting, add a better ballistic skill before you accept the damage and start to degrade. And there's plenty more in here, but there's so many. Those are just a few that I think are particularly nice. Now, psychic powers. So some of these were already in the index, and like in the index and previous Eldar Codexes, we've got Runes of Battle, which are for Warlocks and Spirit Seers, and Runes of Fate for Farseers. Farseers have kept all 3 of theirs from before, Guide, Doom and Fortune, which are all brilliant powers. Doom, I particularly think I cannot see a reason why you wouldn't take Doom if you can. I mean, Guide, while it's good, there are other ways to gain rerolls to hit, and there are very few ways to gain rerolls to wound, and particularly with very Death Starry type models like Lord of Skulls, Magnus, what's his name? Thousand Suns guy. No, that is Magnus. Mortarion, and these really big models. Stormraven Gunship, all dominating play, having the ability to just be like, yeah, reroll to all failed to wounds against that target. You could have 5 different units targeting one of these big models, and Doom, as long as Magnus and Mortarion don't dispel it, or deny it, sorry, is going to be a great way to just boost the power of all that shooting. Particularly with shuriken weaponry, obviously getting the rerolls gives you more chance of getting that 6 for the minus on the AP. So yeah, I think this is a Doom. It's almost an auto-include. Just pick Doom and then one other to taste. Of your new ones, Will of Ashurian is a bit... it's not great. You just add 1 to your Deny the Witch tests and automatically pass morale within 6. There might be times when it's useful, but I don't think it's going to be most people's auto pick. Executioner is essentially just smite, but if you slay a model in the target unit, they get an additional D3 mortal wounds. If you want to use your Farseer for chucking out mortal wounds, then I think, yep, go for it. This is a good way to do it, but you have to it still targets the closest enemy model, so you can't use it to pick on a particular unit. You get what you're given, as it were. And Mind War does allow you to pick out a character, but you have to roll off on leadership. And a lot of characters are going to be in a similar sort of ballpark leadership to your Farseer, so it's a bit of luck whether or not it goes off. But if you do win the roll off by potentially even 7, you roll a 6, your opponent rolls a 1, and your Farseer has 2 leadership high, you could do 7 mortal wounds, but you could equally do absolutely nothing. So a bit too luck based. I think definitely Doom, and then probably Fortune or Guide are still going to be the way to go, using your Farseer to support your army rather than to do the damage himself. And you've always got Smite if you do want to throw out some damage. The Warlock ones, I think you're going to want to take more Warlocks just to get some of these, because some of these are really good. So Conceal is another way to get, obviously all the Warlock powers have 2 effects, and you can pick basically to buff your own unit or nerf your opponents. And Conceal, Reveal, Embolden, Horrify, and enhanced drain were already in the index, but conceal reveal I still think is brilliant. Either get rid of your opponent's cover bonus, or give your opponent a -1 to hit a particular unit. So, I mean, you've already got other ways to get -1 to hit here, but if you don't want to play Altioc, but you still want a -1 to hit on a particular unit, that could be very handy. I think one that... excuse me 1 second. Right, I'm back, sorry. One that I think really leaps out, Quicken Restrain. So Quicken is essentially warp time, pick a unit within 18 inches of the Psyker, and it can immediately move as if it were the movement phase. However, it is limited to infantry and bikes, so it's not quite, you know, throw a Wraith Knight up there like certain Chaos players like to throw Magnus the Red or a Lord of Skulls up there. You can't quite do that, but you can, you know, maybe throw up, you know, maybe very aggressively throw up some Howling Banshees, Fire Dragons to do the job they need to do, or alternatively use it to redeploy a unit from one end of the battlefield to another to plug a gap in your lines or grab a crucial objective, because you've already got some quite fast movement on some of these, particularly as it can affect bikes. And it just says movers in the movement phase, so there's no reason you can't advance with that. You could throw a jet bike unit 40 inches a turn with this. Or the alternative, Restrain, pick a model and half their movement, could be really good for stuffling one of these, you know, fast-moving hit you on turn 1 or turn 2 units like, as I've said before, Magnus the Red, Mortarion, or the Khorne Lord of Skulls. Just, you know, push you back a bit for a turn. You know, you're not going to get into me quite so quick. Yeah, you're going to warp time, but, you know, it's doubling a movement that's been halved, so it's only getting back to where you were. So that's a good one. You can... oh, Jinx. Jinx could be fun. -1 to all saving throws for an enemy unit. So that would include invulnerable saves, as far as I've read. So that's again going to be a nice little way to nerf some big scary guys. You know, chuck Doom and Jinx onto the same model, and then open up with everything you got, and that is gone. So yeah, lots of very cool options in here, and I think Warlocks and Spirit Seers, just because of how good some of these Ruins of Battle are going to play a bigger part in the in Eldar lists going forward, especially with Spirit Seers having gone down 21 points, make them really quite almost spammable now. But anyway, we're up about 40 minutes now, so I'm just going to have a look at some of the other big changes and give my overall impression. The majority of the units stayed the same. There were a few little tweaks to things like Swooping Hawks Las Blasters becoming Assault 4 rather than Rapid Fire 2, which is certainly nice, and Warp Spiders gaining Deep Strike, which they should have always had anyway. But the big unit that I think has had the most change is the Howling Banshees. Banshee masks completely changed their role in this book, from being always strike first to ignore Overwatch, and now I'm just going to check, but I think some of their other abilities might have changed. I've got both the index and this here open in front of me. So acrobatics used to be add 3 inches to the roll when this unit advances or charges. Now you can advance and charge in the same turn. You can declare charges up to 15 inches and add 3 to the charge result. Now, I was initially thinking this would be a great little one with the webway strike stratagem, so you have them pop up 9 inches away and then they only need a 6 to get the charge. Problem here is it says in a turn in which they advance, you can declare charge moves for units that are up to 15 inches away, and you can add 3 to the charge. So as I read that, you can't actually do that if you didn't advance in the movement phase, which obviously you didn't if you came out of the webway strike, so you would still need the 9 there. But there are other ways to boost your charge range. What it does give these girls is an incredible threat range, though. They're base movement 8 anyway. If they're disembarking from a transport, they gain another 3 inches. That brings them up to 11. There's no reason to not advance, because their pistols are... well, the pistols will be affected by battle focus anyway, so they can run and they can advance and still shoot. They can advance and charge, so advance, have an extra d6 inches, so say that's a 3. You're up to 15 inches movement. You've not even charged yet, 15-inch movement. Chuck Quicken on there, it's another 8 plus 3. We'll assume 3 for the d6 rolls. So they've had another movement, so 8 plus 3 is 11, so you're up at 26 inches. You're still not charged. Then you throw your charge on there, and now they are going a further, let's say you roll a poor charge of a 6, which actually becomes 9. You've gone 37 inches in a turn with an infantry squad on foot. They have such a threat range now. And I think the Executioner got a little bit better as well, the Exarch weapon. So it's still minus 3 AP for D3 damage. It actually lost a point of strength, but you don't suffer the minus 1 to hit. And I think that is better overall. I'd rather take the extra hit, the extra to hit, or boost to hit, hitting on 3 up rather than the 4 up, over the extra point of strength, particularly with the way strength works now. It might not actually come into play anyway. So that's all good. I think Banshees are going to be a unit you're going to see more of. Let me see, did Warshout change? No, Warshout, and they're still minus 1 to hit them in combat. So yeah, Banshees are probably the most changed unit. Autarchs haven't had it good. They suffered the same problem as a lot of the bike characters for Space Marines, where there weren't models for certain builds, so they have scrapped said builds. For example, you can't now take an Autarch with a warp jump generator, and you're locked into very particular weapons if you take an Autarch in other builds. So if you go for the Autarch on foot, he now gets just Starglaive and plasma grenades. No other options. An Autarch with Swooping Hawk wings has a Power Sword, Fusion Pistol and plasma grenades, and the Skyrunner has Power Sword and Shuriken Catapult, but at least he can swap the Power Sword for a Laser Lance or a Fusion Gun, so you're much more limited than you were. I mean, they say you can just play the ones out of the index, but it's a bit of a faff to have to carry this around as well as this. So I don't think Autarchs are going to get played as much anymore, even though Path of Command is still pretty solid, giving you an aura of rerolls ones to hit like a Space Marine Captain, and the ability to regenerate stratagem points on or command points on a 6. So yeah, I don't think we'll see. Autarchs are one of the few units that have suffered in this. Just about everything else has got better, and in some cases, like the Banshees, significantly better. And I'd be remiss in not mentioning the Fire Prism, which can now fire twice if it moves under half distance. And I mean, come on, we're not talking about Fire Prisms moving 6 inches a turn and firing twice here. Fire Prisms want to stand still. They've got a 60-inch range on a big turret, so they can see over some of the smaller stuff, and they'd be at -1 to hit if they moved anyway, so Fire Prisms were probably standing still anyway, so there's almost no loss to firing twice. So, you know, suddenly your prism cannon, it's only with the prism cannon, but it's the only weapon you ever really worry about in a fire prism anyway. You know, the strength 12 shot becomes heavy 2, the focus shot becomes 2d3, and the disperse shot becomes heavy 2d6, strength 6, minus 3 AP. That is going to cut through swarms of heavier infantry like Marines. Really going to suffer to that. Not so good against Primaris because it's only 1 damage, but at that point you might want to think about focusing for the +1 to wound, -1 to save, and D3 damage, which obviously can take out a Primaris Marine in 1 scratch. I think combine that with the Altiox stratagem, command trait, to keep them further back, and just the general resilience of Eldar tanks anyway. I mean, this thing has got 12 wounds. I think fire prisms are going to be something you're going to see more of. But the majority of the other changes were points drops, and it was almost all points drops. I think you got a book here that in the index was already working pretty well, but now it's working better. With the points, it's just really been refined. We've got things like Dire Avengers taking a 5 points a model drop, bringing them from too expensive to now probably your best value troops in most circumstances. Jet bikes, -2 to their base cost, and both their weapons got cheaper as well. I say both their weapons because nobody was taking catapults on those. It was cannons or scatter lasers. Both of them got cheaper. So I think jet bikes in general, most people will go for the shuriken cannon now because I think you save 4 points and it's still pretty decent. The shuriken catapult you won't see, and the scatter laser will be really limited to either people who just couldn't be bothered to change them and were like, well, this is what I've got modelled, so I'll run it anyway, which is all fair and good, you know, you've built that model, run it as is. But saim-hann players will, I think, always go scatter lasers because it is a superior weapon if you can get past the -1 to hit. It's had a points reduction as well, which is all very nice. Reapers dropped 9 points, Scorpions dropped 4 points, a lot of the aspects got cheaper. Falcon dropped nearly 50 points. It was overpriced compared to the Wave Serpent now. I think it's now priced right compared to the Wave Serpent, but I think the Wave Serpent was already a real bargain, so Eldar armies aren't going to play especially different to they were before. There's just going to be a few more tricks and a few more of them on the table. And there's hundreds of other points drops. It feels like practically everything got some sort of little tweak in the points. There's very few units that stayed exactly the same points. Guardians I don't think changed, although a lot of their support weapon options did. But yeah, go out and buy the book and read it for yourself if you want to know all the points drops. But there's plenty there, and over the course of building a 2,000 point list, depending on what options you take, you could have 1 or 2 extra units over the list you were running before. So overall, most of the changes are subtle. There's nothing completely like, bang, that completely changes Eldar massively. There's obviously no new units, it's more of a refinement, but it's led to a big overall improvement. It is a much more powerful book than when we were running Eldar in the index. Obviously the points drops, bonus special rules, more options, more tricks, and Eldar like their tricks. So I think it's a very strong book. I don't think there's anything especially broken in here compared to the current meta that's out there. I think this edition of 40k is more aggressive in general and more killy, and there is more stuff that would be broken or feels broken at first, but then you realise there's so much stuff that's really powerful that actually everything is just viable rather than broken. So I could be wrong, we might be 2 weeks time, someone else on planet internet has found some utterly disgusting combo that just cannot be stopped, and good luck to you with that. But right now I think it's just a strong, solid book rather than a complete cheese fest like some Eldar players may have been used to in the last couple of editions. but time will tell. You know, it's still very early days, both for 8th edition, and the rate that the meta is changing as new codexes come out. It's hard to say anything with any certainty. The skeins of fate are moving, as you know, a wise farseer might say, trying to sound wise. But yeah, that is my initial review of the Craftworld Eldar book. Personally, I have a biel-tan army, so I'm looking forward to getting them out on the table. Need more Dire Avengers, though. That's the big kind of change I'm going to need. Not because Dire Avengers are suddenly now completely overpowered, but because before I was running 2 squads of them, 2 squads of 10 with Exarchs with Shimmer Shields, which I don't think is the optimum build anymore. I think they're going to work better in lots of squads of 5 with the Twin Shuriken Catapults. It's more shots for your buck. The invuln save is less relevant because there's less things completely wiping out your armour, and you can always hop in cover and you're suddenly up to a 3-up save, which meaning the Shimmer Shield is worthless against anything short of a las cannon at that point. So you know, you don't really need it. You get more shots instead. And obviously jet bikes aren't troops now, so I can't fill my troop slots out with them. So I'm either going to need to go Guardians, which doesn't inspire me, Rangers, the models don't inspire me, and I think currently out of stock anyway because everyone's gone out and bought them. And that leaves me Dire Avengers, and I really like Dire Avengers. You know, Aspect Warriors are the way I want to go with my biel-tan army. So yeah, I think I'll be getting some more of them. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you missed Sam, like I say, just imagine someone next to me berating me for playing Eldar and saying how disgusting and evil elves are, and I know he won't mind me saying that because I know how much he hates elves. But yeah, he may be back. We might do a banter sort of first look review on the Tyrannid Codex when they come out, and I'll be sitting there shaking my head in fear and disgust at Tyrannids. But yeah, that's then. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.